The Miller family had always been a close-knit group, but as the years went on, they began to drift apart. Busy lives and distance had pulled them in different directions, and they rarely saw each other anymore. However, they made a promise to each other to always make time for their annual family reunion, no matter what. This year, they had decided to gather at the family's old mansion in the countryside. It had been in the family for generations, and it held many fond memories for all of them. But as the family members arrived one by one, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The mansion had always been a place of warmth and comfort, but now it felt cold and unwelcoming. The family tried to ignore the feeling and focus on catching up and having a good time. But as the night went on, the sense of unease grew stronger. The power went out, and the family was plunged into darkness. They heard strange noises coming from the shadows, as if something was moving around in the corners of the room. They tried to ignore it, thinking it was just their imagination, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to do so. As the night wore on, strange occurrences continued. Objects would move on their own, doors would open and close, and everyone heard strange whispering coming from the shadows. The family tried to brush it off as just the wind, but deep down they knew something was not right. The turning point came when they heard a loud knocking at the front door. Everyone froze, and a sense of dread washed over them. They all knew that something terrible was about to happen. When they opened the door, they found no one there, but the feeling of unease only grew stronger. Suddenly, the door to the living room flew open, and a figure dressed in black appeared, wielding a large knife. The family tried to run and hide, but the figure seemed to be everywhere at once. They were trapped, and there was nowhere to go. The figure began to hunt them down one by one, brutally murdering anyone in its path. The family was in a state of panic, and no one knew what to do. They were trapped in the mansion with a killer, and there was no way out. They could hear the screams of their loved ones as they were brutally murdered, and they knew that they were next. As the night went on, the number of survivors dwindled. The family members were being picked off one by one, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. They were trapped in a nightmare, and there seemed to be no way out. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the survivors, a young man named John, discovered an old journal hidden away in the attic. As he read through the pages, he began to piece together the horrifying truth about the mansion and the family's past. The journal belonged to John's great-great-grandfather, who had built the mansion many years ago. It revealed that the man had been deeply troubled and had turned to dark magic to try and solve his problems. He had summoned a demon, and in exchange for its help, he had promised to sacrifice the lives of his family members. John's great-great-grandfather had kept the demon locked away in the mansion, using the family's annual reunion as a cover to sacrifice them one by one. The demon had been waiting for its next offering, and the Miller family had unknowingly walked right into its trap. With this knowledge, John knew what he had to do. He gathered the remaining survivors, and together they performed a ritual to banish the demon back to the unforgettable@gmail.com. Please continue writing. Hell from which it came. They used the journal as a guide, reciting the incantations and performing the sacrifices necessary to break the demon's hold on the mansion. As they performed the ritual, the demon fought back with all its might. It manifested in the form of terrifying hallucinations and terrifying visions, trying to drive the survivors to madness and despair. But they held fast, determined to put an end to the cycle of violence and death that had plagued their family for generations. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the demon let out a deafening roar, and then was gone. The family was safe, but the cost had been great. Many of their loved ones had lost their lives, and the survivors were left to come to terms with what had happened. The family never spoke of the fateful event again, but the memory of that night haunted them for the rest of their lives. They sold the mansion and moved on with their lives, but they could never forget the horrors they had faced. They knew that the demon was gone, but the scars of that night would stay with them forever. Years passed and the Miller family moved on with their lives, but the memory of the fateful event at the family gathering stayed with them. Some of them went to therapy to cope with the trauma of what they had experienced, but the memories of that night stayed with them forever. The mansion was left abandoned, and it stood empty for many years, but the locals knew to stay away from the place, as it was rumored to be cursed. Some said that the ghosts of the murdered family members still haunted the mansion, and that anyone who entered would never return. The Millers' family reunion never happened again, and the family drifted apart. But the tragic event at the mansion was a reminder of the fragility of life, and the importance of valuing the time they have with their loved ones.